My name is Mark Evans Bryan. I am the chair of the Department of Theatre. I've been the chair for a few years. I've taught at Denison for 17 years, and I graduated from Denison in 1996. I couldn't be more fortunate to be here. We're talking in an office that I'm about to vacate for this fancy new building, and I'm very excited about that. But it's been my great honor to be in. This was the person who mentored my senior research had this office. Yeah, it's been a long time, and it's been my tremendous honor to be able to be a faculty member with all these people who are my professors, lots of whom have been retiring lately, which both makes me feel old and also just makes me terrified that I'm going to move forward without this collection of adults. The building was built in 55, 56 and was dedicated in October of 56. Although they'd been producing at that point. So the beginning of the semester that year, they produced the first play in there, and then the official dedication was October 5th or something, 1956. The department had only existed for a decade prior to that. Right around mid-century, when American colleges kind of blow up, it's GI Bill, and it's a lot of people go to college after the Second World War. Then a lot of new programs start sort of popping up, and theater departments tended to grow up at that time, and that's true at Denison too. And it's 45-ish is actually about the beginning of the history of my department as a department, though there had been organized theater production that was sort of club-based or came out of an English department for many, many years at both Denison and Shepherdson College. So we came into being in the 40s. At that time, there was this student named Leroy Morgan who was called Ace, who was, by all accounts, a magnificent student. And so in the program for the dedication of this building, which was named after him, what the then theater professors talked, they made it sound like he was the greatest 22-year-old director. That was the thing. He was an incomparable director, they thought this guy was. Before he graduated, he joined the Army, and he was killed at the Battle of the Bulge in 1945. He had in fact earned a Bronze Star for his sort of heroics earlier on the day that he was killed. And in his honor, people he went to school with started to raise money, which became the funding for not the building, but for all the sort of technology in the theater. The building went its entire life never having a name. It was always the Theater Arts Building. It seems nuts to me that nobody ever raised money on the back of hey, the building doesn't actually have a name. So it was from 56 through the late 1960s. It hosted sort of 100% of what theater was, and in the late 60s it began to have the seeds of what cinema would become. I believe Elliot Stout, who was the original professor and sort of founder of the cinema program, I think Elliot started teaching here in 66, and I believe the first class of cinema students, who I think then were called film majors, was class of 71, if I'm not mistaken. And through the years, the two departments were the same department with slightly different names that changed. And it was in 97 they split for good as theater and cinema. That's after my time. In 96, I was a theater major, and my advisor was a cinema professor, and now that would be slightly weirder, although still fine. At the time, it didn't seem weird at all because it was all one department. In 56, if you look at the program for the dedication of this building, in it they say, "Soon, just to our west, a brilliant, beautiful new theater will rise." From 56, when they built this building, they were planning for that building. The whole time I was a Denison student, I kept being teased by these stories of oh, they're going to build this building, they're going to build this building. The chair of this department had on the wall of his office framed plans for a massive building, which would have included this building and Burke, and would have basically all the space in between us would have become a big theater, and it all would have been one facility. And philosophically, that's kind of what we're doing. Right. It's just that this building's going to, this edifice will go away. But philosophically, that's kind of what the Eisner Center will be. So we sort of decommissioned the theater space in the middle of the building. The building, of course, is called the Theater Arts Building. Right. No one calls it that. They call it Ace Morgan after the theater inside it. We sort of decommissioned Ace at the end of last season. For lots of reasons, but part of that was that some of the guts of the sort of technical guts of Ace are now in the black box, and that transformation had to happen over the summer. So we planned that we would be sort of decommissioning it and then producing this year's season in the black box and in alternative spaces. So I'm teaching in there right now, and my class the other morning, I said to the first bunch who came in, I said that it was really my honor to be teaching them in that room, because that room had meant so much to me, and it's been fun for me to get to do this thing in it. And I said, like, this spot right here, and I was standing kind of a little bit basically downstage left on the A stage. I was like, a number of my most like dear to me memories from being a college student, but also a professor as a director in that room, happened kind of there, like right there. I can point to like, oh, this is that spot where I did this and I did this, and I can think of 3 or 4 plays where I had like a moment right there, downstage left, which is traditionally not as strong as downstage right. I'm a downstage left man for whatever reason, but people always put my body downstage left, but that spot, like, it makes me a little weepy because I've spent a lot of my life in this building. Indeed, early in this process, when it was first announced that this building would give way, would go away ultimately, I think there were a lot of alums who weren't super crazy about the building going away, and every so often the college would put me on the phone with them, because I'm the perfect person to say, listen, I get it. I also was a student here for 4 years, and my office has been in this building for however many years it had been whenever I was making the call. I'm like, I get it. I'm really invested in this space. As a student, even as a student in the 1990s, I thought of this building as tired and kind of crummy and also wonderfully full of possibilities. It's like such a low hang for where the top of the opening is, because it was built to be a black box space with 2 shallow stages on the side, 1 deep stage, and one big open space, and you could kind of put the audience over here. And we rebuilt it to do what it does now. When I was a student, it did not have permanent seating. It legit just had like the kind of folding chairs that my parents had for like bridge club. It just had tons of, and they were the cushy kind. They're like the super nice folding chairs, but they're still just they were like royal blue folding chairs with like numbers, like the kind of numbers that seats have with like a ticket on them, except they were all just like handwritten with transparent tape. And I remember before we would open, Marilyn Sundin, who was the assistant in this department for 39 years, I remember Marilyn going around with her transparent tape and fixing them. It definitely seemed like a kind of temporary operation. It always felt a little temporary, but it felt like we could do really good things. And when I was a student, I did plays that I'm just terribly proud of as an actor. And I'm not an actor anymore, but like I did work that I think was genuinely good. Like in retrospect, I did a bunch of work that was just I was a kid and I was not good. But the other things where I'm confident that I genuinely did something good and something that was really meaningful to me when I'm working with other actors. It just felt right. It was a really meaningful experience to me. I always tell students when I teach playwriting that oftentimes you've got that one theater in your head, and you could imagine whatever when you're writing a play. But at least for me, I have a handful of voices in my head all the time. It's like people I went to college with, or people I knew when I lived in Chicago. Like these actors that to me are like, oh, those are the voices I use in my head. But I also use there's a room in my head, and the rooms for me are the Burke Black Box Theater and Ace Morgan, and they just always will be. Like Ace is going to get leveled and it'll be a parking lot, and when I'm writing plays when I'm 75, in my head they're an Ace, because it's an intimate end use space. It's also really good. I don't think I said that. I mean, I don't think I mentioned that it's actually a really good theater to produce in. It's really intimate. It's like there's not a bad seat in the house, really, because it's just so small, and I like that. And there's enough depth on that stage. There's no side space at all, really, right? So I always tell people that, like, if you see an actor who's like exiting right or left, the odds are there's a wall right there. And the fact that we often have people exit out of particular spots is just because that's where the doors are. Like you literally pass into some of their space. But it also, like, it afforded me room and space, and I like, as a director, I like a lot of room. I like my most favorite plays in some ways are plays where an actor can run toward the audience or away from the audience and really have space to run and like even get smaller as they go. I like a lot of depth, and Ace doesn't have that kind of depth, but it's always felt like it has some space, and so I've been able to produce work in there as a student and as a faculty member that felt good and felt right. So I think it's always been a good teaching space. And I'm not terribly sad that it'll become a parking lot. The building is just a mess in a lot of ways. It's full of microclimates. Like I teach in that room in Ace right now, and like it's freezing. It's absolutely freezing. But it was when I was a student. I loved working in this building. And I loved its weird history. You know, even when I was a student, in addition to being the home of the Department of Theatre for all but 10 years of the history of the Department of Theatre, it also for many years was the home of the Department of Cinema. I remember years and years and years ago, my friend Dave Busan at the Department of Cinema explaining something about our arts departments down on down the hill, and saying like, there's a plus and a minus to this, but they're all like little rebel programs that like everybody has their own building, and none of those buildings are sufficient for what you do. So like everyone's like a little pirate ship. The new spaces are extraordinarily exciting. I'm thrilled that the Black Box Theater that we've always had, which as far as I'm concerned is one of the best I've ever seen in a college, is still right there. It's a little bit nicer than it used to be. But that's a great space. It's a fantastic teaching space. It's a fantastic space for performance. I love that. I love that space. As I think you know very recently well, that the dressing room is not sufficient. But otherwise, it's a great space. So we'll have this 2,400 square foot, 2-story high rehearsal hall, which I've been around the world looking at theaters. I've very rarely, I mean like National Theatre in London, the Complex in Stratford in England, a couple of big theaters in the United States. We'll have a rehearsal space like that, but it's like as good a rehearsal space as I've ever seen. In addition to a bunch of other spaces for experimentation and work. And then the Martin Theater, the Martin Hall, it's called the Martin Hall, the new main performance space in the building it's going to be a beautiful space. Right now it's exciting to be in. It's very flexible. For the kind of space it is, because it needed to serve music, and it needed to serve theater, and it needed to serve dance, it needed to be really, really flexible, and it is. I'm very, very excited about it. Those spaces are extraordinary. Those spaces will let us do. We'll do a lot of the same work we've done. We're really proud of the work that we do. I hope to expand the sort of departmentally sponsored work that we do. So if we can have this, you know, really beautiful building, which is, in addition to being beautiful, and it's going to be beautiful, is like incredibly useful, has tremendous utility, is exciting, and provides for really making new work and creating new things and doing intense and rigorous work. Like, that's good. So part of the deal really is, here's a building that will be up to the quality of the departments that are in it, and we all three departments have really never been in space like that. I'm really excited to be able to have this space, because the thing I'm proudest of in the Department of Theatre is a focus on theater making, a strength in playwriting, a philosophy among all of my colleagues that we want to give students the tools to really create their own work. I walk by with my 7-year-old when I walk into school, and my thing that drives him nuts is we'll walk by and I'll say, "Hey kid, are they building a building right there?" "Yes, Daddy." "Seriously? Because I didn't even notice they were building a building." "Your office is going to be in it, Daddy." It's very frustrating to him, but it makes me laugh every time, because it's crazy to me to see a building right there outside my windows. It's very exciting. I'm really, really, really pleased and proud to be able to be part of this particular moment in time at the college. It's nuts.